Today, we're diving into one of World War II's most daring, most ambitious, and ultimately most controversial operations, Operation Market Garden. This was an incredible gamble, a single, bold stroke that was designed to end the war in one fell swoop.
And right from the get-go, its legacy was sealed. This wasn't just another battle. Nope, this was a high-stakes bet that people would be arguing about for decades to come. It's a story of absolutely unbelievable bravery, set against a backdrop of some truly devastating strategic blunders.
All right, so let's set the stage. It's September 1944. The Allies, fresh off the D-Day landings, are just tearing across France and Belgium. It really feels like victory is just around the corner. But there's a huge problem. Their supply lines are stretched dangerously thin. We're talking a 300-mile chain all the way back to the beaches in Normandy. They just can't supply all their armies at once.
And this is where Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery, a commander famous for being cautious and a meticulous planner, proposes something totally out of character. He says, forget this slow, broad front advance. Instead, let's put all our eggs in one basket. Let's concentrate everything we have into one single daring punch aimed right at Germany's industrial heart. The goal? End the war by Christmas.
The plan he comes up with has two parts. First, you've got Market, the airborne part. This is the largest airborne assault in history. Literally, 35,000 American, British, and Polish paratroopers are going to drop from the sky to grab a whole series of critical bridges. Then you've got Garden, the ground part. That's a massive armored column, the British 30 Corps, that will race up a narrow highway to meet up with the paratroopers.
The whole thing was designed like a delicate chain. You have the American 101st Airborne grabbing the first bridges, then the 82nd grabbing the next set, and finally, the British 1st Airborne had to snatch the ultimate prize, the big bridge over the Rhine at Arnhem. Only then could the tanks of 30 Corps drive up that single road, which would later get the nickname Hell's Highway, to save them all. If just one link in that chain broke, the whole plan would just fall apart.
But here's the thing. The plan was deeply, deeply flawed from the very start. The Allies were betting everything on a perfect, flawless execution. And let's be real, that almost never happens in war. Let's look at the cracks that were showing before a single boot hit the ground.
So the biggest issue, right off the bat, was a catastrophic failure of intelligence. Allied command was totally convinced the German army was on its last legs. They thought the paratroopers would be up against, and I'm quoting here, children, invalids, old men on bicycles. But they had warnings from Dutch intelligence and even their own recon photos showing German tanks near Arnhem. And those warnings, they were just dismissed. The grim reality was that two veteran SS Panzer divisions were right there resting and refitting. They weren't at full strength, sure, but they were more than a match for lightly armed paratroopers.
And the problems just kept piling up. The timetable was ridiculously optimistic. It expected the tanks to cover 65 miles in just 2 days. The entire ground attack depended on one single narrow road, which basically painted a giant bullseye on the armored column. They didn't have enough planes, so they had to drop the paratroopers in 3 separate waves over 3 days, completely giving up the element of surprise. And to top it all off, their radios were notoriously awful, a little detail that would turn out to be absolutely disastrous.
Just think about this for a second. The British 1st Airborne, the guys who had to capture the final, most important bridge, were dropped a full 8 miles away from it. Why? Because planners were worried about anti-aircraft guns. So now these lightly armed soldiers had to fight their way on foot through 8 miles of unknown enemy territory just to get to the bridge they were supposed to seize in a lightning-fast surprise attack.
So, on September 17, 1944, the operation kicks off. The sky over Holland is filled with planes and gliders, the biggest airborne invasion ever. But almost immediately, all those fatal flaws in the plan start to become fatal realities on the ground.
The initial drops went surprisingly well, but the dominoes started to fall right away. The Germans blew up a key bridge at a town called Son, which brought the entire 30 Corps tank column to a screeching halt. Then at Nijmegen, the huge bridge there turned into a horrific meat grinder, holding up the advance for critical days. And all this time, the British up at Arnhem are completely cut off, isolated, and fighting for their lives. By the time the Nijmegen bridge was finally taken, it was too late. The men at Arnhem were out of ammo, exhausted, and surrounded. They had no choice but to surrender. 9 days after it started, the great gamble had failed.
And if things weren't already bad enough, get this. The Germans had an incredible stroke of pure luck. They found a complete copy of the entire Market Garden plan inside a crashed American glider. Can you believe it?
From that moment on, the Germans knew exactly what the Allies were trying to do. They could anticipate every single move.
So why did it all go so wrong? Well, it wasn't just one mistake or one person's fault. It was a total system failure. It was a perfect storm where bad planning, ignored intelligence, and a serious underestimation of the enemy all crashed together.
This is the big question, right? The one historians have been fighting over for years. Was it Montgomery's arrogance? Was it Eisenhower's fault for approving it? Or was it just plain bad luck? The truth is, it's complicated.
We can really break down the failure into 4 key parts. First, the plan itself was just too ambitious, too complex, with a timetable that left zero room for error. Second, that critical intelligence about the German tanks was just swept under the rug. A classic case of what military folks call victory disease, where you get so overconfident you start making sloppy mistakes. Third, the Allies completely underestimated how fast and fiercely the Germans would fight back, using small, improvised battle groups to cause maximum delay. And finally, Hell's Highway became a death trap. That single exposed road was just too easy for the Germans to cut, stopping the entire armored column for hours, sometimes even days.
In the end, Market Garden has often been called a glorious failure. And that kind of fits. The heroism of the soldiers involved was off the charts, just incredible. But the outcome was a crushing defeat, one that left behind a long and tragic legacy.
The human cost was just staggering. In just 9 days, the Allies lost more soldiers than they did during the entire D-Day invasion. Just let that sink in. For the British 1st Airborne, of the 10,000 men who dropped into Holland, fewer than 2,200 made it back.
And the ultimate goal? It was a complete failure. The war in Europe didn't end by Christmas. Instead, it raged on through one of the most brutal winters of the war, leading to the Battle of the Bulge. The Rhine, that final barrier into Germany, wouldn't be crossed for another 6 long months.
And that leaves us with the central question that still hangs over this whole operation. Was Market Garden a bold, necessary risk that almost worked? Or was it an arrogant, reckless gamble that was doomed from the start, costing thousands of lives for a prize that was always just out of reach? Was it, in the end, a bridge too far?